While I was out sick the last couple of weeks, I got an email from a super producer with a link to a Bloomberg article that was discussing YouTube podcasting, the rollout, and the performance of a number of podcast networks on YouTube podcasting. While analyzing NPR, Slate, and New York Times podcasts, what they determined? None of them were doing well. And the author does have some explanation why they aren't doing well. So if you want to know what Ashley Carmen's justification for this is, I do recommend reading the Bloomberg article. I'll link it in the episode notes. But there's one paragraph that I want to focus on. And what it says is, despite their impressive reach elsewhere, these networks' podcasts aren't doing so well on YouTube. Slate's shows averaged around 75 views per video over the past week, while NPR was around 179. The New York Times performed slightly better, especially The Daily, but that show, one of the biggest in the world, still only received around 1,000 views on average over the past week. The monthly numbers for these networks don't look much better. As soon as I finished reading that paragraph, I jumped over to YouTube to take screenshots of NPR podcasts and Slate so I could see what their titles look like, to see what their thumbnails look like, to see how many shows they're posting, what they're offering, and yes, to see what their views are like. And I can see why this article was written because, yikes, these views are brutal. This show, the Bandrew Says podcast, has more views than the almost all of their episodes on these massive corporations podcasting YouTube channels. NPR is hovering between 100 and 300 views for each episode, and Slate is hovering between 30 for a lot of them, up to 700 as an outlier. We have one that is 2,000 views, but overall, not looking too good. But I think we can learn from their lack of success on YouTube proper. So I came up with 3 reasons why I think these podcast networks aren't succeeding on the platform. Number 1 is the most obvious, and it is they are using static images and there is no actual video. What I mean, if you click on the majority of their videos, what you get is 50 minutes of the podcast artwork. There is nothing visually interesting when you click on a video. The reason that's important is viewer or consumer expectation. The typical YouTube viewer expects something that will keep their ocular nerves engaged. If they are scrolling through all of the content that's available on YouTube, I think it's 500 hours uploaded every minute. All of the thumbnails, all of the titles, looking for one thing to watch. They see something that catches their attention. The debt ceiling is dumb from Slate Money. They click on it, and what they get is the podcast artwork they are going to be clicking off incredibly quickly. The reason that's important is the YouTube algorithm. That is what you are looking for when you start uploading your shows to YouTube. You want the benefit of the YouTube algorithm, the discoverability, the new audience. And the reason why people clicking off of your episode is so detrimental to you is completion percentage and view duration. Those are 2 very big pieces of information that the YouTube algorithm relies on. When a video has an incredibly low completion percentage or an incredibly low view duration, it seems as though how that is interpreted is this video sucks or it is clickbait. So by people clicking on your video, getting a static image, and having them click off within 15 or 30 seconds, that is informing the YouTube algorithm this video sucks or the thumbnail and title are clickbait. How does that impact your video, the distribution, and therefore the potential new audience for your video is going to be limited. YouTube wants nothing to do with clickbait. They do not want to be associated with clickbait because that is an incredibly negative thing. If it's clickbait, people are going to leave the platform. And what is the main purpose of YouTube? Keep people watching for as long as possible so they can show more ads. If your video is 30 or 50 minutes long and people are only watching 15 seconds to 30 seconds, that is going to tell YouTube that your content is bad and your content is likely to drive people off of the platform, so YouTube has no reason to show that to a new viewer because they don't want new viewers to be driven off platform. That is why consumer expectation is so important to cater to on YouTube, because you want the benefit of the YouTube algorithm, and not meeting viewer expectation is going to tell the algorithm your content is bad, and because your content is bad, you are going to lose all benefit from the YouTube algorithm. I hope that made sense. The second reason why I don't think these videos are doing well is that the podcast networks are simply re-uploading the full podcast episodes with no shift in the presentation style, with no shift in the delivery, with no adjustment to the formatting, with no adjustment to the length. They are just repurposing existing content. The reason I think that impacts performance is podcast listeners and YouTube viewers have very different expectations of delivery, of presentation, and of format of the content they are consuming. Podcast listeners seem to be willing to go on a 50-minute journey to get to the conclusion. YouTube viewers seem to have shorter attention spans. They know within the first 15 to 30 seconds if they're going to watch your video. That's why for this podcast, how do I start it? Here is what we're going to be talking about today. And here are timestamps in the timeline of the video, in the description. I have to admit, timestamps are likely to decrease the overall watch time of each individual viewer because you're making it easier for them to skip over topics they're not interested in. But it's more likely, in my opinion, to keep more people watching. What I mean, if you have 5 topics in a podcast, YouTube's the worst company ever, here's the microphone I'm using, and somebody is only interested in what microphone you're using, they click on the video, and you don't discuss that until 15 minutes in, if you don't have timestamps, after 15 seconds of you talking about YouTube, they're probably clicking off. But if they know exactly where you start talking about that microphone, now they'll skip to that portion of the video and watch for 3, 4, 5 minutes. So it improves the standing in the YouTube algorithm, in my opinion. I have also made a few other changes, so I have different edits for the audio version and the video version. The video version does not include the podcast intro music. It also doesn't include plugs to bandrewscott.com or bandrewsays.com or geeksrising.com. Because I want people to get the content that they click on for, because that is so incredibly important for YouTube. These podcast networks are not making different edits or different presentation styles between the audio and the video version. They are just repurposing what they made for audio. And to succeed on YouTube, you need to make content for YouTube. That's not what they're doing yet. That is number 2. The third reason why I don't think these podcast episodes are doing well is the podcast networks are uploading all of their shows to the same channel. The reason this is impacting the performance is if somebody subscribes to NPR podcasts because they love the show Car Talk, but that's the only show they care about, what are they going to do? When NPR publishes Book of the Day, Life Kit, Shortwave, TED Radio Hour, etc., how does that work? Those videos are first and foremost going to be recommended to subscribers to NPR podcasts. And for this listener who only cares about Car Talk, when they're recommended Book of the Day, Life Kit, Shortwave, TED Radio Hour, they are not going to click on it. That's a very important piece of data, because that is telling the YouTube algorithm this content is not interesting. This topic is not interesting. If a subscriber to this channel doesn't even care about it enough to watch it, why are we going to show it to more and more people? The subscribers don't even care about it, so nobody else is gonna care about it. That is why running variety channels is so darn difficult on YouTube, because you may garner an audience for one topic that you publish about, but not the others. So when your subscribers get recommended the stuff they're not interested in, they won't click on it. That's going to harm the distribution of that non-interesting content to your subscribers, as well as the stuff they are interested in. Variety channels are incredibly difficult, and they are running these podcast networks as variety channels. To me, it seems like these podcast networks are doing everything in their power to shoot themselves in the foot and ensure their content isn't going to succeed or isn't going to get the benefit of the YouTube algorithm, of that discoverability that every single podcaster wants so much. So to summarize, how did this all come about? YouTube seems to have courted these podcast networks. Hey, NPR, Slate, New York Times, upload your content to YouTube. Upload your podcast episodes to YouTube. And what the podcast networks took that as is, okay, we'll just repurpose the existing content and upload that to YouTube without any regard for what people want on YouTube. So if these networks want to truly leverage the benefit that is available on YouTube, here is what I would recommend. It's not going to be easy. It is a lot of work. I have never said that creating video podcasts is easy. I have never said that uploading your show to YouTube is going to be easy. But this is my advice. Number 1, most important, create some form of visual aspect for the uploads, because that is what is expected by YouTube viewers. YouTube viewers want video to accompany the video that they click on. Number 2, consider creating separate channels for each of your podcasts. That's gonna suck for you, because if you have 50 podcasts, now you have 50 YouTube channels, and you can't just have the channel, you have to have somebody moderating the comments, responding to comments, marketing it, doing something to get eyeballs on that channel. So consider creating separate channels for each of the shows. That's going to ensure that when somebody subscribes to that channel, they are only getting recommended the content that they subscribed for. And number 3, consider a secondary edit for the YouTube version of the show. Maybe that means cutting out some fluff at the beginning so the show starts right with the content. Maybe it means creating clips of the show if that's a possibility. But creating content and tailoring it for the YouTube audience is how they would truly benefit from YouTube's algorithm of the discoverability.